I'm John Travis here in Mullumbimby, New South Wales on the 29th of January, where I'm speaking to Tina Kimmel in Oakland, California on the 28th of January, 2020. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you,
And
Jack. Nice to see you.
You're in your loft.
Yes.
We've known each other for, 24 years. We met at the Friendly Childbirth Initiative when we teamed up to tackle the issue of getting circumcision on the Mother Friendly Childbirth Initiative, and became buddies ever since then, and went through starting the Alliance for Transforming the Lives of Children. And you're, I've got most people in categories for this, but you're multi-categorical. But we'll hit a number of different topics today, but more importantly is who you are and why, what led you into these topics. So let's start with your earliest memories, like where'd you grow up, siblings, birth order, influences that led you to become the activist that you are?
My parents met in New York City at the what's it called, the OSA, the entertainment portion of the armed forces during World War II. They're both in show business, and then my mother branched out into politics. So just to set that stage, New York City.
USO, I think it is, Uniform Service.
Something like that, right? And so they had a child before me who died while she was being born. And I think there have been some studies about the effect of that on a family. So then when I came along, there was kind of a twofold effect of that. One is my mother said, no child has ever been wanted more than you, Tina, because trying to make up for that loss. But on the other hand, she was disattached. She was not going to let another baby break her heart. So I felt it was like this intellectual attachment from her, but not an emotional attachment. So through the miracle of primal therapy, I remember a little bit before I was born. I remember being born, and I remember this one incredible moment where my eyes met her eyes right after I was born, still wet. I remember being wet. And she was just astonished, that I was alive. But then I was whisked away, like they did in hospitals in 1948. Yeah. And that was it. Her body must have gone into grieving, knowing that I had died, because then she didn't get to hold me in her arms. And there's plenty of research now supporting that the separation of babies and mothers affects the mothers maybe even more than the babies. Of course, there's a lot of studies on the caching species like mice. So that's what happened. And we really never connected after that. So I have a ton of memories from being in the hospital for about 5 days and being brought to her every few hours and then taken back away again. And it was hell. It was just formative, noxious experience for me that has ruined my life in a way. It's just been super hard to get to a place where I can expect good things to happen instead of expecting terrifying loneliness and deprivation. I think and that also was a learning experience for my mother, that this is how you treat a newborn baby. She said often, stuff about how she needed to get her sleep in the hospital. And I'm sure those were the words from the nurses. They'd take me away at night so she could get her sleep. And that's the way she treated me. And then my brother and then my sister. that her sleep was more important than our needs all night long. And I have a lot of memories, vivid memories of her neglecting me all night. So it was, you know, illegal child neglect. But nobody was into enforcing that in those days. But boy, did that, you know, it just wrecked me in terms of the harm, you know, that it caused my expectations of the world. Anyway, I did survive all that, and I became a nerd in school. By that time, we had moved from Broadway to Hollywood, I like to say, in the 50s, and my father had an important job in Hollywood, and I became a nerd, you know, separated from my feelings, from my body, and was real smart in school. Was really interested in science, eventually got into UCLA, took my first psychology class, and I was totally in love. And I took like every psychology class that UCLA had to offer in the early 60s. And then how did that happen? I transferred up here to Berkeley, and then I tuned in, turned on, and dropped out and became a hippie. I went to Woodstock with some hog farmers, and I became the sort of the head cook of the free kitchen at Woodstock in 1969. And so then we went back to New Mexico where the hog farm was living, and I took a lot of psychedelics, and they really helped me. They really opened me up, made a connection between this intellectual stuff and my body and the memories in my body. Just, I really want to give a lot of credit to psychedelics. So then I moved back to Los Angeles and ran across a copy of The Primal Scream. And then that just totally drew me in. I got into Arthur Janov's center within just a couple of months in early 1971, I think. And I was just really into primal therapy for many, many years. And that, of course, is tremendous. And that's where I was able to begin to remember all these early feelings. And I'm still to this day, I have my own primal box, padded cell, and I still do it. I went to many different actual centers, kind of moved around actually, looking for good primal centers to go to. But even without therapists, you know, once the process starts where your body and your psyche know that you're welcoming to those feelings coming up, they just come up. And the insights are just incredible. I'm very happy for that and grateful. So,
pause for a second. You've raised
yeah.
a number of questions I think our viewers may have, going back to the hog farm. Like I've heard of it. I don't remember where it was and who it was that. What's his name?
Wavy Gravy.
Wavy Gravy, yeah.
Yeah.
And was where in? Where was it located?
Well, they have a place in Berkeley that I stayed for a few years. They have a place in Northern California where they have a Camp Winter Rainbow. And they have a place in New Mexico, which is where I lived with them way in the boonies of New Mexico.
Right.
And then they were invited to do the Please Force and the free kitchen and the freak out tent and the medical tent at Woodstock. So I went with them. And then, you know, that was just a couple of months trip, and then we came back.
Okay, and I met Wavy Gravy way back when, and he's still at it. And
yeah, he sure is. It's amazing.
I should probably interview him as well.
Oh.
And also with your family of origin, you were the oldest of how many, and what was?
Well, yeah, I have a brother and a sister that are younger than me. They still live in Los Angeles.
And how were relations with them as a kid? Were you the boss or?
Yeah, kind of, because I was the oldest.
Mother.
A
And
little of that, yeah.
also, were you bottle fed or breastfed when they were taking you to your mother?
Um, I have some vague memories of being breastfed, so I know I was breastfed a little. And then I have lots of memories of being bottle fed. But I asked my mother a couple of different times, how long did you breastfeed me? Because sometimes she liked to say I was the most loved, best treated baby that was ever born. She narcissistic person that she was. And she said, so one time a couple times she said, I said, so for how long? And she said, 2 months, as if that's a lot, And then she started saying 2 weeks. And so at one point I said, well, was it 2 months or 2 weeks? And she says, 2 months or 2 weeks, what difference does it make?
Uh-huh.
So that to me really captures the spirit of what that was all about for her. It doesn't matter in her mind, breastfed baby, check, she's a perfect mother. She breastfed me. So it doesn't matter to her because my experience of having, more or less pure nutritional food rather than whatever nasty stuff they were putting in bottles in 1948 and 49 didn't matter to her.
Was the main thing that I know of. Or
What's that?
Carnation or PET evaporated milk was what I got.
Yeah.
Wasn't much formula back then. So this led then eventually to you becoming a breastfeeding expert, which we'll get into later.
Exactly.
So the hog farm, and then for people that may not know of Janoff and primal therapy, this was a major new thing when did he actually start it? Like in the late 60s? And how?
The Primal Scream, the first book was right around 69, 70, I think. Yeah. And I read it at the end of 70 and got in 71, I believe. So the Primal Institute, was started right around then. I overlapped with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, but I didn't actually meet them while I was there. But I did see them getting into a limousine in front of the Primal Institute once.
Interesting. So,
yeah.
Okay, we got you in Berkeley now, and you have finished up with a bachelor's, and
actually, no, I quit midstream. Kind of went back and forth between school and being a hippie for a little while, and I finally. Meanwhile, I moved all over the Southwest going to different primal centers, and I got pregnant with my daughter, Rosie, and she was born at home in 1974 in Austin. I picked Austin because there was a primal center down there. And then that didn't turn out great, and it was too hot for me. So we moved to Colorado. There was a pretty good center in Colorado. And then my son Jesse was born there in 1980, and they're kind of a big tragedy, which is still unfolding, still happening around Jesse's birth. So we had to move back to California. So so Rosie and I moved back to the Bay Area in 1982, and been here ever since. I got a job in a soup kitchen. By giving my reference as being the head cook of the free kitchen at Woodstock. You're hired. It was fun. So I kind of threw myself into that whole hunger and homelessness awareness thing. At that time, I wrote my master's program for this dual master's degree in public health and social. So I cooked for 2 years, and then I got into graduate school at UC Berkeley, social welfare and public health dual degree. And my project was on hunger in Alameda County, which I'm still proud of to this day. I made a huge map of areas of hunger versus the sites, church sites, that were feeding people, and there were big gaps. So I made a presentation before the Oakland City Council and the Alameda County Board of Directors, and there was a lot of policy changes based on my work, new sites that they opened up. So that was kind of cool, yeah. And then, so then I had those 2 master's degrees, and I was looking for a more appropriate job than cooking at the soup kitchen, and I stumbled on civil service. So I got hired by the state of California Department of Public Health as a research scientist. So I did that for 10 years at that point, working sort of around kids' issues, but not in the heart of kids' issues. One of the jobs I had was, as I went up the ladder of, promotions and within the civil service system, was I worked for 6 years for the immunization branch, and I saw all the corruption that went on there. I'd totally concluded that vaccines will never be safe and probably not effective as long as they're in a for-profit environment. There's just too much, way too much, of a vector to cheat, because it's in a for-profit environment. They make a ton of money. And that was in the early 90s. It's much worse now. So anyway, then that I shelved that, went on to other interesting jobs there, but not quite my passion. Meanwhile, while I was working there at the state, I started doing all these wonderful things, like going to the Kim's meeting, joining, the Coalition for Improving Maternity Services, right? And joined APA, which was PANA in those days, but it's Association for Pre and Perinatal Psychology and Health. I also stumbled on NOCIRC, the anti-circumcision people, and got very, very involved with those activities, fighting circumcision of non-consenting screaming infants. And got on the state had a breastfeeding task force. I got onto that and went to their meetings, helped move that forward. That was very, very exciting. And at some point, it finally dawned on me that maybe I could actually be doing those kind of radical things to support children for 40 hours a week instead of just in my spare time. So I started applying to the state has a maternal child health branch with a breastfeeding unit. And I started applying, and every time I would lose the job to somebody who had an actual PhD. I just had 2 master's degrees. So I put my job on hold, and I went back to Berkeley in 1999 to get a PhD in public health and social welfare. And my original topic was actually circumcision, trying to prove that circumcision was child abuse. And boy, were they not interested.
They wouldn't like that.
No. So I kind of, in a sense, wasted 2 years working towards that, but I had to shelve it. I couldn't get any advisors to sign off. So I started over on the topic of breastfeeding, thinking that was a no-brainer, but I still had trouble finding advisors. Boy, I tell you, the whole notion of prevention is like foreign to them.
And this is School of Public Health. That's what I found at Hopkins. It's not prevention, it's early detection.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
I was a preventive medicine resident, and it wasn't prevention.
Is that right, Jack? Wow.
Yeah. That's what I did at Hopkins, was general preventive medicine, and it was not. That's fortunately where I discovered the wellness book. But now you hooked up with Mary Main there, so tell us about
Yes, that was great. Mary Main was teaching a couple of classes that you could get into without being locked into her particular program in the psychology department. So I was from outside that department, but I did take 2 classes with her. It was phenomenal. One was like a general class on attachment, I think, and the other was a whole class, a whole semester about the adult attachment interview. It was just thrilling to be there. I learned so much about attachment and, you know, how important it is. Once again, prevention,
Yeah.
you know, it's hard to replace.
For our viewers, let me fill in that Mary Main was after John Bowlby in England and Mary Ainsworth in Baltimore that teamed up and basically created the field of attachment theory. Mary Main was like number 3, and she did the research to show the early non-attachment or insecure attachment was correlated with later adult behaviors, and that was her. I understand that's been her main contribution. Yeah.
Contribution, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
she also
developed a test, and that you're describing the adult attachment.
She didn't. Some people on the East Coast actually developed the test, but but she's all about it, you know. Mm-hmm. She also takes some credit with inventing or discovering the what would you call it, disorganized attachment. Yeah. Really severely abused kids turn out to be nuts adults who, you know, incoherent was the concept. That was very interesting to me. If you can't coherently describe your experiences and your feelings, that's a mark that things were so severely disordered that you're protecting yourself by not thinking straight about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
you're a PhD, now you're a double master's doctor.
Right. So then I did go back and get that job at the maternal child health branch that I worked so hard for. Unfortunately, then it was 2008 and the economy was collapsing, and the state government was taking these huge hits, 15, 20% cuts, you know, they tell you, anyway, and furlough days that we weren't getting paid for. It was really awful. And the maternal child health branch was not on anybody's list of branches that needed to be saved. So there was a lot of chaos in the staffing, and the program basically got cut. So I was sort of being offered other jobs, but by that time I was commuting 2.5 hours each way from where I live in Oakland up to Sacramento, the state capital. I just decided to retire. So I took retirement. And so I've been retired for 10 years. And to some extent, I've realized my dream of throwing myself into all these wonderful volunteer things. To some extent, since I have less income, I'm kind of sticking to home and trying to do things like put in solar panels and stuff so we can survive the coming apocalypse. So let's see, what have I done since I've been retired? I got pretty involved in the vaccine thing for a while as a sort of a whistleblower, like a low-level whistleblower, since I did have that experience in the 90s of being there watching some of those vaccines like hepatitis B be introduced to the schedule. There's no hepatitis B. We don't need that dangerous and expensive shot to 4 doses, 3 or 4 doses, starting on the day you're born. I mean, it's just so nuts. So I've spoken at rallies. I'm on YouTube. I organized some a big symposium through the Green Party. Oh, and that's another thing I've spent some time on. I'm running for county council again for the Green Party. That's like the central committee, and trying to get political support for children, basically. Not having as much success as I was hoping through the Green Party, but they're so beleaguered, you know, it's hard for them to branch out to anything new. So the vaccines and the Green Party and threw myself into the International Primal Association for a while, and of course still breastfeeding and anti-circumcision work. Meanwhile, studying, attending conferences, reading. There's so much out there, and more research being done on separation, for example, maternal infant separation and how that damages you. And I can attest to that. I feel like I was damaged by it. Meanwhile, though, I'm doing a lot of writing, and I'm hoping that I can coherently write something, a book or something, a blog, a series of articles, something that will help policy. My dissertation, by the way, was on breastfeeding policy in the US, and it focused specifically, I did research on whether the welfare reform that happened in 1997, which prior to that, welfare paid a mother to stay home with her baby and had pretty good breastfeeding rates. And after January 1st, 97, they only paid you if you left your baby and you went and worked at a minimum wage job, which I think is the whole point of welfare reform, is to create a new pool of minimum wage workers. I suspected that it brought down the breastfeeding rates because, Burger King and stuff, they don't have lactation accommodation unless they're totally forced to. And that's part of the policy, is the laws that are. There's wonderful, wonderful activists getting those laws passed slowly. And indeed it did. My original research, unfortunately, couldn't find it because the data set, it's not nothing wrong with the data set. It's just that the new version of welfare is so different. You're only on it a month at a time. So when you interview these new moms, well, it depends on what day of the month you ask them whether they're on welfare. So it couldn't capture the status of being on welfare. Whereas prior to that, this data set captured whether the mom was on welfare, and both of them captured pretty well the breastfeeding. So in the one state, Alaska, where I could see anything, we did see a reduction after 97. But I found that someone else had done it using a completely different data set, and he found a very strong evidence that breastfeeding rates had dropped all over the country. In the states that had work requirements for welfare on January 1st. So, we need to be pushing our lawmakers to put their money where their mouth is. They say they support breastfeeding, but then they have this awful policy of sending new mothers to work away from their baby. So naturally, breastfeeding is going to go down, and that harms the next generation. And those are the kids who need it the most because their nutrition is generally poor. And they, of course, breastfeeding, I don't know if people need a primer on that. There are thick books summarizing 200 years of scientific studies of how bad for you formula is, how necessary breastfeeding is, human milk for human babies.
200 years, wow.
Oh yeah, there's early studies. I mean, there's forever. Sure, there's a book called Don't Kill Your Baby, which is from a poster from the 1700s, 1800s. Don't feed your baby that nasty stuff in bottles. And then there's the whole wet nurse thing. And co-sleeping is another thing I got involved in the middle of all this, and published a nice article in Mothering Magazine, one of the last of the paper copies, in an issue called Sleeping with Your Baby, the World's Experts Speak Out. And I was one of the world's experts.
I didn't know about that. Huh.
Oh yeah, my article is called "Co-Sleeping is Twice as Safe." I used the same exact data set that they consumer, juvenile products, well, whatever, the lobby for the crib manufacturers have a lobby. They got together and wrote an article about how unsafe co-sleeping is based on a data set, a federal data set. And I took the same data and showed how they had used it wrong, and actually it's 2.5 times safer to sleep with your baby than not. Because
I remember when you did that, yeah, because you've got the stats, you know how to dig in and find bad statistical stuff, which same thing with the African circumcision studies that everyone thinks are so great. So yeah, you've got your feet in so many different areas, all of which have been major interests of mine as well. And one of the reasons we've stayed connected over the years.
Yeah.
So, I can't help but remember going to the Gay Pride Parade with my daughter, thanks to your making me aware of it. That was probably about 10, 12 years ago. And also you would have groups meeting at your house, anti-circumcision, we're calling it. Intactivist. Before we weren't using intactivist that much in those days, but now that's the much more accepted term. You were, all these guys and you in your house.
Yeah, or a few other women like, Marilyn Milos, who started NOCIRC, now Genital Autonomy America, and other wonderful women too. But yeah, I had 60 meetings. I organized 60 meetings before Jonathan Conte came along and kind of took over that role. And unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. So it's a little bit of a void there right now. Wonderful people are keeping doing it. And younger people, that's what we like to see.
Yeah, there's a whole generation I'm getting emails. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how Maryland started it over in Marin, and you picked it up in the East Bay, and they got Georgia running Intact America. It's like, guys, where are you?
Well, more and more, compared to the vaccine stuff, at least you see people talking about circumcision. You can say that word now, in articles, on television. You can say it. It's acknowledged that there's some question. Boy, you cannot say vaccine, man. You will be shunned. You'll lose your job. There's TV personalities who lost their job just for saying the word. You're not, it's supposed to be a no-brainer. Just do it. Even though the package inserts say this is very dangerous stuff, don't ask for the package insert. Don't ask your doctor to explain anything about the pros and cons. No. So I fault the media. For that.
What's really complicit. Is in New Jersey yesterday, they defeated the bill with a popular uprising. So there's some hope.
Yes.
Maybe in Maine as well. Those are the two states. I know you were on the front lines of the California fight, and
New York a little bit too.
Yeah, but it's true. It has become such a political hot potato, and everyone thinks that the data is there and it's all established. And show me your data.
And you're not allowed to even say, show me your data. That's the thing. They have whole, I think, like symposia for MDs, family doctors to study. They're calling it vaccine hesitancy. What you're supposed to do if your client, your patient, the parents actually display vaccine hesitancy. Well, you start reciting what you've been taught to say about that over and over and over again until they give up.
Yeah. Wow. I admire your steadfastness, that how you've kept in there on so many different fronts. And got the skill set that we so desperately need, particularly the statistics. And you're my go-to person when I need like that chart from that's showing that the diseases were all in decline prior to the introduction of vaccines.
Wasn't that something?
So
did I tell you I ran across somebody who was working for a vaccine manufacturer who came over to our site, who intercepted an email during the development of the rubella part of the MMR that said, hurry up and get this to market before the disease disappears by itself.
Interesting.
So that we can get credit for it.
Yeah. So your zeal for reform and activism is probably unmatched of anyone I know.
Huh.
The number of topics.
Yeah, spread across topics. Yeah, I mean, there's some very zealous intactivists, for example. No, they're wonderful, but it's true. I feel a little bad, a little bit like I'm spreading myself too thin, but I can't not do it. I mean, it's so important. And fluoride. Have you heard about the latest thing with fluoride? It's wild. Harvard is now admitting that babies lose 4 IQ points when the mothers drink fluoridated water. So
no, I didn't know that. I think
yes,
that's gaining some ground for sure.
Yes, that just happened in the last month or two. It's so thrilling.
I missed that, and then we've got dental amalgam, and we've got
yeah. Well, that's over, isn't it? They're not using mercury fillings anymore, are they?
They still are, yeah.
God, seriously.
Yeah. A lot of dentists stopped, but it's hard to get them to talk about it. They don't want to own that. And yeah, there's so many areas, and I keep hearing about new ones every day.
Really? Like what?
Trying to think. Well, one of the most intriguing ones is the anti-fat movement that the sugar industry funded Ansel Keys back in the 60s to cherry pick data, and the food industry picked up on it, and we have this massive wrong direction of low fat this, low fat that, when it really needs to be low carbs. And that's a political hot potato too, because the American Heart Association refuses to buy it. They cite a 16-year-old study. One
study.
Yeah, when all the data are showing just the opposite. And there are these huge issues. I look at it as like the banks that were too big to fail. The organizations that are too important. Like, what would happen if it was proven that circumcision was harmful beyond a doubt, and all of the public health recommendations, all of the organizations of fluoridated water, of vaccines, it's like we're backed in the corner where these organizations are afraid to admit they're wrong. The political costs, the economic costs of how they get sued. It's like the emperor's naked, but we dare not recognize it. So politically, it's
you're right. Yeah. On the topic of the carbs, I'm on a low carb diet myself, so I'm sensitive to these findings. There's a wonderful movie. I think it's called The Magic Pill, which is an unfortunate title, but has among many other wonderful things. Well, it shows a couple of autistic kids who speak for the first time after they're put on a low carb diet. It's so incredible. And then it ends with the hearing of a doctor who was disbarred his medical license was taken away for recommending low carb to somebody, and they went through a whole hearing, and all the evidence in favor of a low carb diet got to be entered into the record. This isn't in the U.S. I think it was in New Zealand, and he won. So a lot of that hearing is at the end of this movie. It's wonderful. So I recommend that. I
haven't seen that. What's the name again?
I'm pretty sure it's The Magic Pill.
Uh-huh.
I think they called it that because the idea is it really solves a lot of problems. Just eliminating those excess carbohydrates solves a lot of problems.
Like a magic pill. I keep thinking of what's his name? The doula guy that was at the meeting with us.
Marston?
No, Klaus. Klaus saying,
the doula guy. Not he's a doula, but yeah. Yes.
If doulas were a drug and had that kind of result, everyone would be taking it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
There'd
be money. They'd be pushing it. That's right.
Yeah. Got to track down Phyllis and get interview her since.
Oh yeah.
He's dead, and I don't know what. I think Kimmel probably gone too, but. Yeah, those that meeting up there at Mount Madonna Center sure was a life changer for me. Meeting Suzanne, you, I had met Jim Prescott at the APA meeting the December before then, and that's why he invited me up there. But I met Ray there. I met, of course, Roberta Scare and. All those folks, but and then eventually Sharon Humanick, and that was quite a watershed experience for me.
It was great.
So, what else can we tease out of your amazing life that on the road could benefit from?
I feel like I've been sort of learning up on stuff and organizing a few things along the way, publishing a few little things along the way, but that I'm building up to something bigger, I hope. Well, that's everybody's dream, of course. To do something that rattles, that really makes a difference. I don't know. So I'm open to suggestions. I have lots and lots of notes to turn into writings. So it's congealing. I feel like it's congealing. Now is I was breathing in. Now it's time to give out. Something.
I'm going to be very interested to see what unfolds, and hope I'll be around to. Document it.
Oh yeah, right.
So, yeah, I'm thinking there's a new generation coming along, and it's important to capture. Pardon me. To capture the wisdom of us old guys and gals who are starting to fade off, and hopefully we can pass it on to the next generation, and they can build on it, and we can truly build a culture that is not so shame-based and repressive, and connection-based instead of shame-based. So
just connection. If the civilization does collapse, which never know, look at the paper every day, but anyway, it's really important for us to leave like breadcrumbs, like your recordings, for people to start over with. I mean, I'm going to go with that. Not all humans are going to die if civilization collapses or this empire collapses.
For sure.
Some will survive, and of course we have our instincts, but they've been just piled on, buried by the culture. And let's hope that that our cultural norms, you know, the alternative cultural norms have a loud voice that survives so that young people can pick that up instead of just some horrible shards of the awful stuff that capitalism really created.
Mm-hmm.
That
Behind
has
that
brought
is,
such destruction. What's that?
behind that is patriarchy, which is the structure that capitalism is dependent upon, and the structure that creates the basically wage slaves that drive capitalism. So without that kind of power over and
Yes, power over.
yeah, and not the circular group interactions of people
See,
on in basis.
I think that if we got what we needed in those first few formative minutes and hours and days of our
Yeah.
post-uterine life, you know, when we really are soft clay, you know, the brain is really firmware waiting to know what kind of environment that the child has been born into. If we got enough, if there was enoughood, there's some book called Enoughood, right? There's abundance. Everything would be different. We wouldn't put up with people trying to crush us. We would just always innately strive for happiness and fulfillment for everyone, because obviously everyone needs to be fulfilled at the same time. And that would feel normal to us, that everybody's getting what they need. That would feel normal because that's what we experienced when it was so important to experience that. Now, everybody feels it's normal to not get enough, to suffer, to strive. It's competition because I didn't get enough. Maybe it's because you stole it all from me, or I have to kill you because I didn't get enough. And then, of course, you poor guys, on top of all that deprivation, you get assaulted. It's a wonder we're still breathing. You know, this massive experiment on how badly you can treat a newborn and still have it survive, that I think the Western, mainly America, has been doing for 100 and 200 years.
Is there really a book called Enoughood?
I think so.
To check that out.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great note for us to wrap up on, unless you have any other thoughts for wisdoms. It's been a delight to pick your brain a bit, and
thanks, Jack.
Thank you. So take care, my friend.
Okay, you too.